Okay, we're recording. So good morning, George and Addy. This is going to be a special. Addy's in the house. So so what's been going on with you guys for the last week?
I think the big story is the shooting, this election whistleblower, and Addy has been in Atlanta for 2 weeks, and I don't know, interviewed the family, stayed with the family, and so he posted a video last night of the shooting. You can see the two muzzle flashes. He also posted a video of all the holes in the house, and I'll just let it. He put a nice hour-and-a-half interview of the person up on our site. She's a wonderful person, a military family, 2 boys, just the nicest people in the world. The only thing she's done controversial in the last 10 years is say when elections are bad from either the Republican side or the Democratic side. So I'll let Addy take the story from there.
Yeah, so I posted a short story, it's like 2 minutes yesterday, and the shooting happened at around 11:15 p.m. on Christmas Day. So same day as the bombing in Nashville as well. But it's nice because the hard evidence of the muzzle flashes and the drive-by going on, as well as the bullet holes. And in addition to that, it seemed that there may have been 2 different types of caliber weapons used, where the bullet holes in the majority of them seem to be coming from a small revolver, because no casings were found, no cartridge casings were found outside the house at all. And there was a shot that appeared to be at a different angle than the others, more of a straight on angle than an upwards angle. And that shot was actually the one that was the bullet hole that was basically on the master bedroom. So that looked a little more directed perhaps, but not confirmed as far as 2 different weapons, but it does seem like that may have been.
And did it seem to you, Addy, like that was a bigger caliber? The straight on shot was a bigger caliber, like maybe a rifle bullet, or? Yeah,
that's what I was told as well. And it does, you can see that it's at a different angle as well. It looks like more of a straight on angle. And I was told as well, there's no real angle of elevation on either side of the bullet entry or exit into the wall.
So how, from the base of the house to the quote rifle bullet, what's the distance?
That's a good question.
Are we talking more than 6 feet? Or are we talking?
Oh yeah, I would say so for sure.
Well, then that would mean, and there's no hills in that area. It looked kind of flat in the picture, in the video across the street. I mean, it looks like suburbia, normal suburbia. Everything's flat.
It's a little hilly in that area. I don't have the best recollection. I was there just a night, and that was actually around the time I was doing a story on ballots being moved to Sheriff Jackson's office via enterprise trucks from the election prep center as well. So the reason for that message being sent, and it's quite a hard message too, because there was definitely a possibility that someone could have been struck by those bullets, obviously. So I don't know if it was professional, by any means, but it certainly was someone who didn't care if anyone got hurt.
Well, my thinking is this, that if it's more than 6 feet and there's no angle, then they must have shot that on a hill or on the back of a truck or the ladder or something. They had to be at some elevation somehow, either artificial or natural.
Yeah, at distance somehow. Yeah, I that idea came to me as well. But the shots that come from the street, you can see a couple of them on the video that I sent you, and that video is on both my channel and the neighborhood news channel as well. If people want to check it out, it's like 2 minutes long, the story. So just got the facts out as soon as possible.
Well, go back a little bit. When did you interview her? The day before, 2 days before, or before the shooting?
No, it was back when I was in Atlanta. I was there for about 2 weeks covering the Senate election committee hearings on fraud, as well as the Georgia Senate race. and we did a pretty long interview. It was like an hour and a half edited in total. So this must have been like the second week of December.
Yeah, something like that. About 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah, so like 2.5 weeks ago or so. And yeah, it's, Amber is someone who's not afraid to speak her mind. So she is, I think, used to certain types of things happening. Not she's not used to drive-by shootings by any means, but
Threats. She's been threatened before. She has been threatened before, but it was in regards to a Republican and talking about Mitt Romney before. So this is interesting that she's getting it from both sides now. But the thing I found is interesting is, was there only 2 shots fired from the car that we see in the video, just the 2 muzzle flashes, and then 3 more from a higher angle? Is that right?
So the higher angled shot was just the one, and that was the one on the wall to the master bedroom.
Okay.
And the lower shot, I think there was 3 shots, 3 or 4, but you only can see 2 muzzle flashes on camera just because of where the shooter, the drive-by shooter, was relative to the surveillance camera, the security camera that was set up. So we talked, or I just inquired about beefing up the surveillance a bit, because when I was at Shrimpsu's place, he has this surveillance where you get notified on your phone via an app if somebody triggers the camera. So I was probably going to send that recommendation over. I couldn't remember the name of the system, so I'll have to ask Shrimp about that. But yeah, it was a security camera, but it wasn't, it was not by any means the nicest one out there. So in that sense, it's hard to, and I was going to ask you about this too, Paul, hard to identify the car make and model, let alone the license plate. I don't know if you got any headway with that.
No, I didn't look at it in that detail. I can, but going back to the shots, we're not sure that the rifle shot, for lack of a better term, was on the same day at the same incident. It could have been shot before that drive-by, could have been after, could have been the day before, and she didn't know. I mean, so I mean, there's no correlation between the actual drive-by and that long shot. It could have been the same day, because in the video we only see 2 shots. Did she hear shots in the house?
Oh yeah, they all hit the deck, and
so do they remember hearing 3 shots, or what do they remember hearing?
I was gonna follow up with them on that today, Paul. I didn't want to inundate them with calls, because they were talking to friends and family and other people in their network as well, and just kind of figuring the situation out. So I didn't want to take up too much of their time yesterday, but I was gonna ring them today just to see how they're doing. But
my gut feeling is that long shot was days before.
Yeah.
And that either someone wasn't home and they didn't know about it, or something happened, but they just didn't know, and then they do the drive-by knowing that they're home. They're the stalk in the house. They see that they're home, and they do the quick drive-by.
Yeah, it was certainly reckless endangerment. I mean, no doubt whoever was doing the shooting, whether it's 1 or 2 shooters, didn't.
I swear I thought on the license plate it said Clinton.
Clinton?
Yeah, I'm just joking.
At least you could say Ford. Yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
Well, I mean, you just got to be safe, Addy. I'm a little concerned now, but you're over the target when you're like seeing this kind of stuff in your newscast.
When you're becoming the target.
Yeah. But you're doing really good work, and I just want everyone that's listening, please subscribe to Addy. Please help him. I mean, what's the best way to help fund your travel and your food and everything, because this costs money.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. I have a Patreon, so if people want to do like $1 or $2, otherwise, I think the easiest thing for a lot of people is just to do a one-time donation. So PayPal is great for that as well. Just because, I mean, they do take their, they skim off the top like all the other services, but it's nice because I can access the money right away. So so that really helps. And I know George enjoys donations as well. So
Yeah.
sponsorship. We call them
Sponsorships.
sponsorships. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing is, I told Amber, I said, now it'd be a great time to take the boys to Disneyland. Like, let's get out of there. Get out of there for a couple of days. Don't be a target. Again tonight and again. We haven't talked to her since last night. So I mean, we're on edge now constantly, and the people who watch our channel are on edge, and we feel like it's our responsibility to provide updates. I talked to Addy this morning about, if the Connors are okay with it, to send him down there so that people can get a layout of where the shots were and when the shots happened, and try to get some forensics on this, because they reported it to the police, I think, but not the FBI. But there's not been a lot of action so far, is my understanding.
Yeah. The way I worded the question was, did you alert authorities? And they said that they had. But Atlanta is crazy right now. And just speaking as a foreigner, not somebody who's from Georgia or Atlanta, you could feel a bit of tension in the air for sure. I want to get this out. It just wasn't a huge priority. Was this the Lenox Mall shootings? Lenox Mall is the mall in Buckhead. It was like a stone's throw from where I was staying. And there's this pattern of shootings going on at the mall, but not just the mall. It's I think they're at like a 22-year high of homicides for the year, something like that. They had already eclipsed it by summer or something like that. So definitely a lot more violent city than usual, akin to all other American cities this year, really, with everything that's been going on. So, but yeah, there was some other stuff too that I think, there was more than one person, I think, that knew where I was staying, and in the hotel, my sponsor, my big sponsor there in Atlanta, put me up in the Hilton there, so I could do work and kind of use that as the base of operations. And there was just a couple of weird stuff with a note being left or a business card being left. Like, I went for a smoke break, right, and I was gone like maybe 5 minutes. And I came back and there's this business card like right outside my door, pretty much. And I don't know, could be a coincidence, could be a random.
Yeah, but
person.
what did it say? Do you want to say?
It was for a contact in the Army.
Well, that might be a good thing.
It could be.
Not necessarily a bad thing.
It could be something else too. But I don't know how much I should or shouldn't say on that. We did a little bit of background digging, and there was. It might have been a tie to a different branch of service in the Army.
Yeah, the person had basically, I ran him, and the person was in the Navy. So you can switch services. It is possible, but it's interesting that you'd be running around as a colonel or a major in the Army when in actual fact you're an ensign in the Navy. So I didn't want to run Addy into that situation.
Yeah. That's weird.
That was kind of a weird situation, but he was there for 2 weeks, going to the courthouse or the legislative assembly every day. And this is where Amber was supposed to testify for all the rigging, all the election machine rigging. And this is where they did this hocus pocus with the schedule to make sure that she couldn't come forward. They saw who was going to testify, and they put the worst, goofiest people at the front, and then they put all the really people with all their facts straight and so forth toward the end, and then they cut it short. They delayed it and cut it short. I think she was you were there that day. She was scheduled to speak, I think, a couple of times, right?
Yeah, it was actually it wasn't Amber, but it was a different source who wants to remain anonymous. So we could say it's Amber for now, perhaps, but I just don't want to bring any extra heat on her. Not that maybe it would help anything, but
that's what they were doing. They were shuffling.
George is right. Yeah, he had all that right. They were moving people around, and they showed up late. One, I don't know what his position was in the house, but he didn't even show up at all. And so it got moved to, I think it was after they actually certified the results, which was the following week on Thursday. And that's just part of the misdirection and just not following protocol as far as oversight on the election as well. But yeah, swamp is definitely deep in Georgia. Very, powerful geopolitical hub in Atlanta, with Hartsfield-Jackson being really kind of a joint or pivot for that. What with it being the busiest airport in the world by passengers. It's been called like the child trafficking or the trafficking capital of the world for that reason. And another source as well, I had spoken with, told me about how they followed up on the mayoral election and the fraud that was apparent there. They would follow up on the addresses to voters, and they would get to these addresses, and it would be just like an empty lot or an abandoned house or, you know, a parking garage or something. And by following up on those voters, right, if you want to call them voters, they realized that there's quite a bit of fraud going on. And the mayor who had run, a woman, she actually lost two election cycles in a row by, I think it was the same exact amount of votes.
Like 37 votes or something. Yeah.
It was like in the 700s, I think.
Yeah.
It was
Okay.
like 711.
But it was the same exact number.
Yeah, it was the same number for both elections that she lost by. So, yeah, and just doing the investigation on the cabal too. I got a working map going to with some help of my source down there as well, tying a lot of the key players together. That was when I did the Harrison Deal story as well, who was the young man killed in the car explosion on Pula Parkway, which George actually followed up on, along with the GBI agent as well, Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Mr. Sullivan, who may or may not have been doing the investigation on that. It was in his section or division of the state in the area of investigation. And I also read that they were treating it as a homicide at one point as well. So one would think from all that information that investigation would be under his
well, can I interject? I told George this when I looked at the crash.
Oh, quick. I was just going to say, he was found dead in his house. And George did a follow-up on that as well. So, but yeah, go ahead.
Wait, who was dead?
The guy who may or may not have been investigating the Harrison Deal explosion death died. I went over there to Statesboro where he worked at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. And I talked to one of the people he worked with, and he said, well, he wasn't on the case, but that's the type of thing that Georgia Bureau of Investigation does.
Well, what? I mean, he was found dead, but of natural causes?
They said suicide.
So he was Arkansas. He was Arkansas.
Well,
he was Arkansas.
Well,
in Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to jump to that conclusion. It is an odd timing. There does seem to be.
There are no coincidences. You know that. There are. I mean, there's ways. I mean, we may not have the actual data point that shows, exactly who did it, but this is definitely fishy. Now, so from your investigation, after I told you what my thoughts were on the crash, what were your conclusions?
Well, I kept thinking this Harrison Deal, who worked for three different people here. He worked for Brian Kemp at one point. He also worked for Senator Perdue. I also met Senator Perdue and Donald Trump Jr. on the campaign trail, and elbow bumped him and all that.
He was most recently Loeffler's aide,
but also Kelly Loeffler's aide, and of course that involves him directly with two of these Senate races that are coming up on January 5th. Early voting has already started. Plus, it involves him with the governor through his daughter as a girlfriend-boyfriend relationship. The governor has to be the one who requests the special investigation. And the guy told me to my face from GBI, he said, we're a request-only organization. The governor has to request us. I'm saying, I just was over there in Pooler. I've gone by the crash site 5 times. I've talked to people. They heard it for miles, the explosion. It was high explosive. Isn't that what GBI does? Isn't that what you guys do? Don't you hire all these ex-military guys that know demolitions and know tag ants that are left, the little chemical traces that are left from these explosions? Isn't that what you do? You mean the governor didn't order an investigation into that, especially after what you said to me, which they would have had been going 160 miles an hour to create an explosion like that.
And a key thing to note as well was the fact that Kemp called for a signature audit pretty much right before
The day before, yeah.
Harrison, right before Harrison died. And then that following week, I think it was on the Monday, was when Sullivan died. And that actually wasn't reported until a few days later.
Mhm.
And as they do, I think for suicides, there was no cause of death listed in the obituary. But he, from what I read, he was very good at his job. He rose pretty quickly through the ranks, and I think he actually started out as a beat cop. So this smart Irish guy. Was this
See,
Mr.
I mean,
Sullivan.
if someone's gonna, my perspective on this is that if someone's gonna commit suicide, it's usually because their career is going down, they don't have anything to do, something, catastrophic happened, within their family unit or something like that. This guy, he's got an important case to investigate. And then all of a sudden he decides to commit suicide. That doesn't fit the modus operandi of someone that goes down the track of suicide. It's usually they're lonely or, they lost their business. But this guy, my point is that he had something on his plate to keep his mind moving. Even if he was suicidal, which I probably wasn't, but if he was suicidal, he had something to keep his mind active to find some reason to live.
Yeah, and his
If he
trajectory.
didn't have anything on his plate, then I would say, well, maybe. But
His
you're talking about one of the biggest news stories, this year to investigate.
Yeah, and even this shooting, this drive-by shooting story, this is headline, CNN, MSNBC, whatever, Walter Cronkite type of stuff,
Mhm.
So, and unfortunately, we're the ones that have to do this, this investigation. But one could look at it as a threat, not just on Amber and her family, and there were children in the house, by the way, when this happened, and smart kids, they hit the deck, when this shooting occurred, but by extension, a threat to anyone she may be affiliated with, right? Like I was just there a couple weeks ago in this house that just got shot up. So, and that obviously extends to you and the big guy here. So.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was throwing football with the kids at Stone Mountain, and she came out with her whole family, and we got to know the whole family. So we,
These people are cowards.
yeah, they really are. I would say that that's not a lot of, firing into the house at night with little kids there. But anyway, we were kind of in between what to do. We either, I first reaction was, hey, time to go to Disneyland. But they don't want to show any weakness. They don't want to take a backward step. The guy's a Marine, so he doesn't want to take a backward step. He's not afraid. And so now we're thinking, well, should we go down there? And we've had some of our people that follow our channel and do news for us every once in a while say, yeah, I'll go down there and help out. And so
there's a primal aspect to it. Like when you look at like wolves, like hunting elk, the elk actually has a better chance of surviving if it just stands its ground with a pack of wolves around it, rather than if it runs. Because if it runs, it's going to be, driven to
Mhm.
exhaustion. So I think that just made me think of that, ties into it. But I was talking to Christian Gray about this, who's another contact, actually one of George's supporters. He's been following George for a bit, and we were just talking about power laws, and he was basically saying you got to know when to retreat, right? It's not dishonorable to retreat if you need to. So, but as Rommel once said, I don't photograph my army in retreat. Rommel was the avid photographer. It was one of his hobbies. So.
yeah.
What was his
Yep.
nickname? Rommel's nickname, wasn't it like the Fox of the Desert?
Desert
or something? Yeah, the Desert Fox.
Yeah. So there's a flip side to this, which is maybe this story needs to be covered more, and send Addy down there and shoot it in the daytime so people get a sense, and then interview the family again. She's been on several times with us, so everybody knows who she is.
Yeah, very powerful woman. Amber is very, very powerful woman. Very sure of herself and very sure of her principles as well. So, a really great patriot to have on the team for sure. And someone who has courage.
Yeah,
Well,
she does. She does. And the other interesting, you mentioned the Clintons. She went to the same church as the Clintons in Arkansas, and knew Bill Clinton real well. Knew what musicals he was in, church musicals he was in. Hillary was did a 1 year of nursery school or Bible school there. The elders wanted to kick him out because he was Bill was sleeping with different women in the church, causing divorces. It's a whole paid place. If you watch the whole interview that Addy did, it's really quite amazing. And you wonder, did that whole Arkansas shadow follow her, to Georgia? The devil went down to Georgia, so to speak.
Well, what I'm thinking is that this corruption of the DNC is probably tied into the drugs that were the drug running that was going into Arkansas. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some connection, and probably Prather knows this, with Georgia and Arkansas.
Burt Lance, you remember Vince Foster dying. One of the things was he didn't want to take the drug business from Arkansas to the White House. He was like, hey, we're in the White House now. I mean, we use the drugs to make the money with the Rose Law Firm, and that was then, and all that's all behind us. Let's not keep going. And Hillary was like, no, I'm going to be the president of the United States. I need that money. And so Burt Lance, I don't know if you remember, he was with Carter. He was laundering money for the Bank of Georgia, through the Bank of Georgia, and then it was a Florida bank for Iran-Contra.
Is this tied into the savings and loan scandal of 92 or 90?
The loan scandal was a little bit with George Bush and Keating and the Keating Five. I think it was a little bit after 2004-ish, 5-ish. But it was basically clean up on aisle 7. It was all those people who got money. And it's very simple. It's a very effective thing that CIA can do with the drug money is, hey, you can't put the drug money in the bank, right? So because it's money laundering. So I'll give it to a political person, but I'm not giving it to you unless you're on my team. And if you're not on my team, if you ever cross me, it's Arkansas time. So it is kind of a nasty little slope here.
And to tie it into, but before I get to that, the Clintons actually did lose they didn't get kicked out of the church, but they did lose their voting rights in the church. But by then, Bill had already kind of taken advantage of the political sphere boost from being associated with the church. So he got kind of what he wanted from being associated with that. It's a very big, it's kind of like a mega church, lots of money, right across the street from the Capitol, or very nearby to the Capitol building down in Arkansas.
Little Rock, yeah.
And just going back to the shooting, I think it also should be noted that this happened on the same day as the Nashville explosion. So I think there is multiple operations that were, and I think still are in effect on Christmas Day. And we're talking about the strategic aspect of choosing Christmas Day. Everybody's at home. Most people have their TVs on, and most people are off the streets as well. So this is the perfect day to, along with being really a cornerstone holiday for our Judeo-Christian roots in the West, the perfect day to select for such an act. And very fishy. And George did a bit more digging than I did on the Nashville, a couple players associated to the Nashville bombing, and he'll get to that in a second, I'm sure. But I think that's something to be noted as well. Along with, there was one guy I saw saying that he heard gunshots for several minutes before then. I don't know. I was watching it last night after we were working. We've been working on George's books pretty much for most of the time that we've been here, for the working hours we've been doing. And he was saying that he heard gunshots, and it just seemed to me like a training exercise, and only one guy in a big city like Nashville heard a shootout. I'm not really buying that. It's akin to, we don't have to get into the Frankfurt. I don't know if you heard about the so-called Frankfurt shootout between Black Hat Spec Ops versus Patriot Spec Ops over in Frankfurt. There was a story going around about that. I haven't been to Frankfurt, but I have been to Germany, and it's a big city, and there's military base there as well. And it just seemed very unlikely to me that nobody would hear a shootout in Frankfurt, and only one guy would hear a shootout in Nashville. So I don't know. It just seemed like a training exercise to me, George.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you tie these two things together, because if this story gets out at 11:15, whatever the shooting was on Christmas, if it gets out Christmas Eve, and this becomes CNN, hey, this is reprisals against whistleblowers, that's the Christmas news in the morning. But if at 1:30 somebody puts a van in Nashville away from Atlanta, get the attention away from Atlanta, and something blows up in Atlanta, then we're all going to be talking about Atlanta for the next 3 days. And I really think this should be the Atlanta story. Nashville. This should be the story on CNN, which is the shooting to intimidate the election whistleblowers, not the Nashville thing.
And there was a similar occurrence of this in Michigan, which I was not able to verify. It seemed to me it was still in the realm of hearsay, because people were saying that it was a targeted shooting by virtue of a domestic dispute or a girlfriend-boyfriend dispute. But this is clear-cut intimidation, a political intimidation. And, we've been seeing this all over the country this year. It reminds me of the story I did on the Judge Salas assassination attempt, where her son was killed and her husband was put into the hospital as well. And they don't hire, the best of the best CIA Mossad guys for this first message, right? They don't care if somebody gets hit, but a professional could have taken out Salas and her whole family, right? Just send 3-4 guys and send 2 guys in. Likewise with this situation as well. It was more so intimidate, send a message. If people get hurt, so be it, type of thing.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I heard. Okay. So there's, I guess, 2 working theories with the whole Nashville thing. One is the diversion theory, like what you brought up. Okay. Divert attention. So eyes are not on Georgia and they're on Nashville. But it was right in front of the AT&T building. The building is owned by a VC that also has positions. I'll have to. It's Cerberus. Cerberus has positions in Dominion.
Yeah.
So why is it that the actual quote diversion is to take out some infrastructure that's owned by Cerberus, who owns shares in Dominion? So it almost seems as though it was targeted by quote, I'll call them the Patriots.
Well,
so there's this was it an infrastructional, or was it to take down infrastructure, or is this the first salvo of the Civil War, and it's all done in Nashville?
No, it's the CNN fake news. Because so I've covered Steve Feinberg with Cerberus Capital for 4 years.
Yeah.
He bought DynCorp, and I went through the first 4 years. People remember this, me talking about Steve Feinberg, and then how they did everything. I mean, they did child trafficking in Eastern Europe, drug running, and chemical weapons testing in Haiti. I mean, you name it, they did it. You want to spray paraquat in Colombia? Call DynCorp, right? Chemical weapons, biological weapons. Bioweapons are us, kind of is their tagline, right? So literally, I've been talking about them for 4 years, right? When I saw that Cerberus Capital through State Street Capital bought Dominion, I couldn't stop laughing. I remember when Trump put him on the security team. This is what you said before, Paul. When Trump names these people and makes them part of their inner circle, you think he's in on it, because he put Steve on. I talked to somebody who worked for Steve in Afghanistan at the State Department in New York in 2018, maybe 17. And one thing he said was to her, she asked him, Steve, are you compromised? And he said, we're all compromised. It's like, what a great Mossad guy he is, you know. But you know, when you see these things, it is kind of like it's right out in your face. And I will say, a lot of people ran down the fact that these servers, this is server snatch, basically. The AT&T people have said this morning they can't get back in, they can't get to their servers. They cleared the building, so they weren't there to guard their servers. It seemed like a building clearing operation, right? That's why you had the warning. And those servers on the trunk line to Atlanta during the election. And we ran down this same person who had the gunshots pumped into her house. She showed me a list of 20 companies that Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, was involved in investing in China. And it just so happens there's another guy in China who is named Ron Raffensperger, who's investing in Huawei, the one who has all the back doors in all the cell phones and has the back doors in the chips, in the modem chips for uploading to the county. I'm not making this up.
Another China connection.
Another China connection. I mean, they had traffic to the cell phone modems that night from this Guangdong where he's based. Is it a server snatch to get rid of that IP traffic back and forth? Patrick Byrne was on all the shows. I'll be right to a second. Saying that there was some company, some Chinese company who's already been in the news for hacking, already been in the news for exfiltrating secrets, that was dialed in that night. So there's second party verification. He works right for Flynn and Bannon. So I don't know.
Another China connection too that I did mention with regards to the ballot trafficking story I did was, anybody has seen that, there was an armed Overwatch, along with the lookout, and the lookout was in the parking lot of a dojo, and the owner of that dojo has connections to China as well by way of Canada. But just going back to the Nashville,
Addy's talking about where the ballots were stored. This same guy whose wife were the bullets going in the house, same Marine, goes down there and looks at where the ballots are being counted. And they're all being centralized in this one house. And there's that Overwatch guy with an AR-15 looking out. and so they tell Addy about it. So Addy says, the good reporter he is, well, let me go down there. So Addy literally is walking at the red dot. He's got a film of the guy. It's really great. You got to see this. It's like, oh, that red dot, you know. Anyway, tell that story. That's
you literally had a red dot on you?
Well, he wasn't there the day I went, but they were still moving the ballots, and the company they were using was Enterprise, a rental company. So they were bringing the ballots from the election prep center right to the parking lot of the sheriff's office, Sheriff Jackson, who is losing power on the 5th, but has been in power for 10 years. And he actually started his career where else but the Federal Bureau of Investigation, along with, this is just a random side note, this guy, Grady Judd, I don't know if you guys know the sheriff in Polk County. He just keeps popping up on my YouTube channel. And I'm like, what is up with this? There's only one sheriff in the whole nation who's doing good work. And I look into him, and he also started his career at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Wow. They put these sheriffs in these counties, Fulton County, Polk County, these choke point counties.
It's almost like an acting school. I swear to God, the more you get into this, it's like an acting school where they say, well, we need a couple of sheriff heroes. Who should it be? Well, let's make sure it's all of our guys that used to work with us, you know, that are good actors. You know, it's kind of funny, actually.
Because the sheriff is not only a chief of law enforcement, but he's in many ways a politician as well, right, with being the face of the police force. Yeah. So,
and all powerful in terms of seizing things like force majeure, like for any kind of confiscation and so forth. The sheriff has to do that.
Yeah, so, commander in chief, really, of the
county,
the police forces of the county. But I just wanted to go back to the Nashville bombing. Another idea I had was, if 911 calls are knocked out for 100 miles or 200 miles, that makes doing operations very easy, because you get this black hole, this surveillance black hole, where you can do a server grab, like George was saying. You can do intimidation or whackings if needed. You can move people, and all these are possibilities. And there's a possibility it may have been multiple operations, not just a server grab, but something well. And as far as I know, it was, I think last night even, they still didn't have power. I hadn't checked on that recently, but we have someone who's a follower of George. I think they're in Knoxville, and they said they still didn't have power last night, or line ability of phone ability either. So,
well, if I think it's true, but if we assume that the theory is the diversion theory, and we have these whole orchestrated effort to steal the server and all this, then there was a more orchestrated play going on than a larger agency. This wasn't a lone wolf. This was a well organized, well coordinated, choreographed operation, assuming that it's the diversion theory. And it probably is the diversion theory. Now,
have you heard this?
I guess what I'm saying is that they're trying to steal the server. They shut down the 911 calls. They can simulate now that if you do locally shut down a 911, what actually is happening in that little community? How are people thinking? How do they work?
Yeah,
this is opening up to the idea that if any patriot, decides to go against the government, that it's already primed to write legislation to curtail, movement, or curtail the Second Amendment or whatever. Under Biden's administration, there's definitely going to be gun laws that are going to be proposed. I don't know if they'll be struck down, but they're going to propose these gun laws. So you can almost see this. What I remember of Obama's administration, even though I'm trying to forget it, but what I remember is that there were a lot of shootings, but after those shootings, there were always like this push from Congress to curtail the Second Amendment. So they were trying to eliminate AR-15s or bump stocks, or certain ammo couldn't be procured or whatever. There was always something that they were trying to eliminate with the Second Amendment. So I see this as like a 3 or 4 pronged kind of operation that's going on. It wasn't just a drive-by, and it wasn't just a blowing up of AT&T's building. This thing was well coordinated.
See, Steve Feinberg had Remington. He bought Remington, the ammunition supplier. So he had the whole database of all the people who buy ammunition. And so it's been a kind of an operation to build dossiers on anybody who has got a weapon. Anything that they do wrong, just lay it on thick with DHS, with the dossier. Start doing disruption on their lives. Make sure they don't get a promotion. Make sure that they can't get into colleges. Maybe you might want to even go in and leave a letter saying the guy's a pervert to the guy's boss. Typical disruption operations. And Steve Feinberg runs this thing. Steve Feinberg also, because you're a car guy, he was the one when the Bushies wanted to get out of DynCorp. It was owned by a bunch of Republican guys, Pug Whitaker, Harvard, and all this. So they collapsed Chrysler. Steve Feinberg's the one who made all the money on the bonds, got all the bailout money, and he bought DynCorp with that money. Steve Feinberg doesn't buy anything. He uses the public's money. What's the first thing they did after the explosion? They asked for emergency funds because the explosion. And I listened to the CNN metadata of, oh, it's so huge, it's so massive, it's massive. The word was massive. They kept using that word over and over and over, and make sure we get funding. Let's not worry about anybody getting shot for voter. And Trump yesterday, man, he's on the golf course flying out tweets. This was the biggest steal still ever. He's not giving up at all. He's not backing down at all. So I think
that was good.
One of the other big things is taking the oxygen out of the room for Trump, push it toward Nashville so that we can't follow up on the election either.
Yeah, I thought that was good to see. Paul, was what George mentioned about Trump's tweets. I think people needed a morale boost, and it definitely, I think I got a morale boost from seeing those tweets and seeing that fight there still for Trump. And it does seem that he's listening, with his comments on the pork bill and getting more money to Americans, especially when you look at how much foreign aid is going out. It's just ridiculous. Egypt, Pakistan, Israel, of course. And a multitude of other countries as well getting more money than the American people.
Well, my take on this whole stimulus bill is twofold. One, it's so brazen of the pork that's written in it, that it shows that they really don't care about the American worker, even though the Democrats are spinning it that if Trump doesn't sign it, then he must not care about the American worker. But if they cared about the American worker so much, why did they only give $600? Yet they're throwing millions and millions and millions of dollars in things that are totally not centric to the country. They're all these foreign things that are being funded. So there's that issue. But because it's so large, it would not surprise me that written in between the lines, and who's got the time to read 5,000 pages, I'm willing to bet that certain elements of the BioPatriot Act are there. Maybe something about decashing or the technological backbone for decashing for the Federal Reserve, or something that's dealing with funding for militarization or tracking mechanisms for individuals that have COVID. There must be something in there that is an element of the BioPatriot Act. And you and I, talked about the BioPatriot Act a lot. But, so it's almost like, again, another diversion. The headline news is Trump doesn't care about the American worker, and the Democrats do, even though it's quite the opposite. But that's not really the real story. The real story is probably what's written in between the lines of the 5,000 pages. But not just that. If you follow the money, who is getting it, and who wrote in those bills, who drafted those, who was sponsoring certain amendments to the bill, I'm willing to bet that either primary or secondary connection to some sort of funding. So they send it, let's say, to Cambodia. All right. These individuals that are working in Congress have, they invest. They have investments. All right. It would not surprise me that somehow, some way, they have invested in a company that will benefit from the money that would go to a certain country and benefit that particular transnational corporation, and therefore it would help. They would help their right. And that's what it is. That's what's
those real earmarks. Those are the real earmarks, and we showed like 20 of them with the Awans. Biotech, satellite companies, surveillance, big data, chemical, generic.
This is how someone that is in Congress that's only making $120,000 a year or whatever they make, they end up becoming millionaires. This is exactly how the game is played. They take American tax dollars, write into a bill. They know where it's going to be invested in, so they have insider information. They put in the position, and then all they have to wait is for the stock price to go up, and then they check out.
Yeah, and
it's exactly what this is.
6-figure salary is no joke either. It's nothing to scoff at. It's I think I read yesterday, conservative estimate. If you're making 6 figures, you're making more than 80% of Americans already, but it's not enough. For some of them, but it's a classic tactic. I agree, of hiding.
I mean, 80 to 90% of Congress goes in poor and becomes millionaires when they come out.
Yeah, I mean, Pelosi's worth tens of millions, and
she's hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. Einstein's hundreds.
Yeah, and that's the money we know about, right?
Right.
So,
and she has a vineyard.
Hey, can we? That's so funny. Can we talk about this Anthony Quinn?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the Anthony Quinn Warner is the guy that they've said, and I love it how he's got a Hollywood name, Anthony Quinn, actor, and then Warner, like Warner Brothers, and then he gives his house to a 29-year-old a woman who does what they call location work, which is when you're going to use a house for filming a movie. You rent out the house for a while, and that's the person that goes around. This is the girl in Hollywood that has this house at this guy in Antioch, Tennessee. And a month before this operation, he gives the house for no money to this 29-year-old. And you're not allowed to follow up. She just says she doesn't know anything. She's not going to deny or admit knowing the bomber. Well, doesn't that mean she knows him? I mean, if you didn't know him, and she says she didn't know anything about getting the house. If you didn't know the guy, you would just say, I don't know this guy. He put my name down on a thing. Michelle, I can't remember what her last name is. Michelle Swing. It's like, I don't know this guy. Somehow she's in a Hollywood production company, AES Associates, which is Ancelet's entertainment, studios, right? How does that happen? Is this not just a big movie? Right. And then his real name, which again, nobody on mainstream media seems to be able to do a lookup, is Steve Quinn. And he had a couple of possession charges. Heavy is the only one I saw out there, heavy.com, who actually had some of the background. I had this stuff out 24 hours before they had it out. I'm like, what's wrong with you people? We were writing books. We were going and doing other stuff. We weren't even paying attention. We were like, oh, I got 2 minutes. I'll go over and do this. These people are totally covering this up. I have a feeling that they weren't even going to say who got blown up. They're going to find a piece. I always thought, hey, wouldn't it be great to ask a convict, say, look, hey, Anthony or Steve, whatever your name is. Two things. One, you're a convict. You're going to spend the rest of your life in jail with Bubba. This is your last offense. If you give us a finger, okay, we'll blow up your finger. You're free for life. We'll get you a new identity. You're gone. Or the other thing is, there's this fake web page for the Tennessee militia that these people put their names in. Get some dupe, some patsy like an Oswald type to go into this thing, teach them how to make bombs, teach them, radicalize them. This is a guy who approached me, a guy named Deep Uranium, who was doing this in West Virginia with the militia in West Virginia, teaching people how to make bombs, encouraging them, paying for their school. And then you say, hey, we're going to try to use you to catch this terrorist. So drive your RV down there with a whole bunch of gasoline, and we're going to have him hit a fake igniter. Okay. That's the case also I was familiar with in Portland for the Portland Christmas tree bombing. What's the common thread? Anthony McCabe of the FBI. He does all the fake bombings. Addy and I were in Atlanta with 92. There was the bombing in Centennial Square. 96 there was, or 95 was OKC. Then 2000 I was in Seattle during the Space Needle supposed bombing there that night. Andy McCabe. Just follow every 4 years. The election cycle is one of these big bombings. It's sort of like Solar Winds comes and wipes out all of the footprints of all the hacking after they're done with their election operations. And then immediately they come in with some kind of bombing or something to take all the oxygen out of the room away from the election hacking, it seems like.
It's interesting. Wow.
Another red flag too with the Nashville event is the fact that the police were on the scene like right away. And I think that was the reason for the shooting excuse of, oh, there's a shootout going on or reports of shots fired, which as far as I can tell, other than the guy who, by the way, covered his face with a mask outside, who is claiming that he heard shots, I haven't seen any chatter of shots on Twitter or anywhere else that I could see. So having this excuse of shots fired gives first responders a reason to explain why they were on the scene so quickly as well, along with the red flag of no casualties being sent. And I noticed too that they hastened to notice the difference between this type of terrorist attack and ISIS, right? They really wanted to delineate those two for whatever reason. I kind of saw it as, oh, they're trying to paint it into a white supremacist look or a McVeigh type of situation.
That's what my impression was, and that's why I said, was it the Patriot theory or was it the, or some other theory? It did at the early stages. It gave me that feeling that it was a Timothy McVeigh kind of spin.
They've already come out with, he was a 5G nut. He thought 5G caused the COVID. And so this is the new attack, is like, these 5G nuts want to blow up your city, right? So now anytime you heard somebody just ask, say, hey, well, radio frequencies, they can they're waves, and when they hit something, they cause a disturbance, and maybe this does activate. Who knows? I don't know.
Well,
Millimeter.
the thing is there is evidence that if you already have inflammation, if you have chronic inflammation, that overexposure to 5G, meaning that you're near a tower on a daily basis, either because you have work or you live right next to a tower or whatever, that will upregulate NF-kappa beta. Well, NF-kappa beta is pro-inflammatory. So you actually get sicker by being by a 5G tower if you're already susceptible to, chronic inflammation.
It weakens your.
Yeah. Because what it does is it's upregulating NF-kappa beta. That goes into that actually allows for transcription of pro-inflammatory genes. So, I mean, this isn't like being a 5G nut or anything. This is just well known, that it does upregulate pro-inflammatory genes, that, cytokines and stuff and then when you have too much of that, then you're actually weakening your immune system.
Yeah,
so there's a connection between 5G and weakening of the immune system, but it's through.
That supports George's spraying theory as well. And you mentioned the multi-pronged approach to this operation. I don't think it was a distraction, yes, but also a very it served a very logistical function of providing that surveillance black hole. So if they do want to amp up the 5G and there's no surveillance, they can do a spraying op wherever that black hole is, right? So that ties into what George has been writing about as well, with bioweapons being the new high ground.
Right. See, my thinking is that can 5G affect the immune system? Yes, but you have to be pretty close to the 5G tower. So, not everyone's going to have that chronic exposure. But 5G is definitely the platform that they need to do surveillance, real-time surveillance, and not only of you, but to your friends and friends, all in real time.
Yeah,
so
I think if you do get the Bill Gates tattoo, the microderm, microneedle thing, that there is this ability with Internet of Things to pick that up. And 5G, I mean, if you look at it, the millimeter wave type technology that's used in airport scanners, you have a ability there to communicate with some kind of embedded device. Now, how small that device is, you can argue about, but you can just see they're trying to attack and make out this new tinfoil 5G person. That this is the new person that they're trying to caricature and say, this is the nut who's going to blow up your city, right? And he might be nice and not kill a whole bunch of civilians, but he's going to blow up your infrastructure, blow up where you work. This is why you really do need to get the vaccine and get the microdot, get the Gates microdot. You don't want anybody who doesn't have the microdot in there, because they're going to blow up your building, So that's, and the other thing about Quinn that was so interesting is how there's no pictures of him, no social media profile. It's like, how is that? How does somebody live to the age of 63 and create no track marks, and we can't find out anything about his relatives or anything like that. He just seems to be a character actor. He's supposed to play the role of the 5G tinfoil hat. That seems to be the new attack.
I think it was Jay who wrote about the most effective way of discrediting someone is getting some sort of infiltration into a group to basically just spew a bunch of nonsense, right? So that way you can disregard the whole group or the whole person's ideas at large as well. So if they do want this 5G patsy, then it makes anyone who talks about 5G in a conspiratorial way seem like a kook, right? Like, oh, you're talking about 5G as a conspiracy. You're gonna go blow up a AT&T data center, which is also significant as well.
Well, I think that to prove your point, I think that patriots out there that are thinking about doing things against the infrastructure of the country, most likely will be triggered when Biden is inaugurated. if he's another.
Yeah.
So they're covering the basis that, okay, if you have someone that does decide to lash out against the government and attack infrastructure, either power grids or 5G towers or, some sort of infrastructure, building infrastructure or something like that, then they've already covered it. Well, this is just a terrorist against the country, against us. He's a 5G nut or she's a 5G nut. And, they're probably also anti-vax. They'll spin the anti-vax and the 5G thing all in one, so, and then anyone that's a lone wolf that does these kinds of things will be discredited in the media.
Yeah. And Paul, having worked in cell towers and all this with AT&T was a big customer of mine and so forth. I mean, it's just more bandwidth. It's more calls to the tower. I mean, that's nothing. I was all for it, 4G and 5G, great. But what it really delivers to the end node is lower latency. You can't have automated vehicles with latency. They'll run into people. They'll run over people. You can't have a bunch of RoboCop. You can't do RoboCop with 4G. It's too much latency. You can do 5 and that battle center, that warfare center up in Detroit, down by where is that? In Warren, Michigan, where they do all the tank advance. That's what they're working on over there. They filmed RoboCop over there, as a matter of fact, and that's what Steve Feinberg is in. Steve Feinberg is in all of these. Hey, RoboCop this thing. When I get the UN money, I don't want to pay a bunch of UN soldiers to come here from Nepal to shoot all you people. I want to shoot them with people who are remotely viewing, or even better, AI. Use AI to shoot people. That way I make all the money. I don't have to pay a bunch of mercenaries. That's how Steve Feinberg thinks. So I think also you're going to see with the 5G rollout, I saw this the first time in Los Angeles, these little robots, these little R2-D2 type robots running around. Have you seen these?
Yeah, they have them in the United Kingdom as well, which I think we should all be fortunate we don't live in the UK or Australia based on how things have gone for them. But yeah, what George means by latency is the time it takes from sending a command to a computer and that computer affecting that. Correct?
Right, right. But when it's remote over the cell phone, it is a factor.
Longer.
Yeah. Just like when you hear a phone call from the moon, the latency was like, an eighth of or seventh of a second. If it bounced when you have a satellite conversation, where you see the newscasters, you see the latency. That's the latency bounce. Or from deep space, you get 7 seconds. Sometimes it's a minute latency, right? So, but if you're driving and you're trying to react, like you're trying to shoot somebody running, you can't have latency. You have to be able to track them. And 5G delivers you that kind of bandwidth with low latency. And, I'm not saying it's all going to be RoboCop, but they are working on it. And they did do the movie to kind of put it out there. And they did film it right by where they're doing that technology in Detroit.
I suspect what they're going to do in Detroit, all right, is they're going to use the Boston Dynamic Hellhounds. They're going to literally hook up guns to those Hellhounds, and that the 5G is how they control them. And that, and it's real time. Everything's in basically real time, low latency. And they don't need bipedal RoboCops. It's going to be quadpedal Hellhounds that are just basically running around the city. And if they do something wrong, then they have the camera on. They know your location. They probably identify your face, so they your biometrics, and have a file on you. And then if something gets heavy, then they start shooting from the guns that are attached to the Hellhound's back.
It's like,
so I don't see RoboCop being bipedal. I see it as an actual animal that's actually like a robotic animal that's running around the city.
Yeah. It's like that movie Elysium. They got the robot cops walking around, and there's no actual humans.
Right. But they're bipedal. See, they're anthropomorphic. They have this, they have this human feel. I don't think that's the way RoboCop's going to be rolled out. I think RoboCop will be rolled out as Hellhounds.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, remote women in the Israeli army and the IDF, I have been shooting remote machine guns in the Gaza, sitting in Tel Aviv, and then they go put their bikini on after their 8-hour shift is over. So, I mean, this is old news to Steve Feinberg. And Steve just wants to just roll this out everywhere. And he gets this UN money. Peter Strzok being the number one guy that every time there's an explosion, here comes the UN money. And now here comes Steve Feinberg with his handout saying, hey, I'm the guy to keep the peace. So I really think that, gosh, I've been talking about this for 4 years and it keeps coming true. I have to laugh. I'm rewriting the books because people forget that it was so long ago I talked about Steve Feinberg and Dancor. But when I saw that Cerebus Capital, I did have to have a chuckle. And Dominion Energy also is another one, because Dominion voting may or may not be related to Dominion Energy, but Dominion Energy was running around, with Warren Buffett, has all the oil trains. He has a monopoly on the oil trains. If when oil doesn't move by pipeline, it's Warren Buffett that owns that thing. Well, now he's in the gas line transmission as well. This is what Seth Rich was selling for Warren Buffett. And it's Dominion Energy. And who is on the board of Dominion Energy? Bill Barr. Bill Barr. Of course, he's not going to go crack down on these people because he's a shit. And of course, he's going to go ahead and take an early Christmas and not be around when any of this stuff happens. Where Trump was going off on the DOJ yesterday, just totally. They did nothing. They didn't. This is the biggest ripoff in history. So it'd be interesting to see. Coming up on this is January 6th, where Trump is saying, hey, I'll see you all in Washington on January 6th. So that's what we're getting ready for.
What's your take? So this is probably going to go to the Senate, right? Do you think that Pence is going to say, I'm not certifying this, and then it'll go to the House for vote? Or do you think Pence will cave in and certify it?
I think Pence is a plastic doll. I don't know. What do you think, George?
Yeah, I definitely. Pence is the guy who was leading the charge for the 25th Amendment coup. That was the first coup that they tried. So I've never liked Pence ever since the first deal was made in May during the primary with Cruz and bringing Pence in. They said, okay, well, we'll get Cruz out. That'll solidify. Trump will be the guy, but we'll have Pence in there spying on him every day. So it'll be like we're in there. They just never were able to get Trump out. I just think Trump surprised them at every turn somehow. But as far as this thing going to the House of Representatives for the vote, and the House, when they open the electors' votes and not supporting, I think there has to be some proof that comes out about the China involvement or the Iranian involvement or the Serbian involvement. There has to be some evidence that comes out, sort of like 9/11 type evidence. Like here are the hijackers and here's the hard evidence before people will do that. I don't think they're going to do it just because Trump says we should do it. That's my opinion.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say that the strongest evidence, there's probably two types of evidence that show that there were voter fraud. One is eyewitnesses saying that bad things were happening with these ballots late at night or early in the morning, depending on your perspective. And then the other is the statistical evidence showing that this was a statistical improbability that Biden won. So are our representatives in the Senate going to actually use common sense and say, well, wait a minute, there's an awful lot of affidavits saying that there were bad things going on, that the night of the election and days after, and the statistical evidence, which I think is the strongest. If they don't pay attention to that evidence, then we have to conclude that they're trying to hide. They're trying to hide the election steal. So if Pence is being truthful to the evidence, and that there should be a discussion within the Senate about that evidence, then it'll go to the House. But my concern is that Pence is part of the deep state and that he's going to just certify it, and then it'll allow him to run for 2024 as president. So he views this as the potential way to survive, to be able to still have a political career. If he certifies it, he's guaranteed never to be president, because there's no Democrat that will ever vote for him in 2024, even if he certifies it.
Supportive of Trump. I think he was kind of a filler. He was a safe option for Trump as VP, but I don't think he's going to be their 2024 guy. I'm going to go with the Amber Connor theory, and that's Mitt Romney, just because.
But Pence maybe as a VP for Romney.
Yeah, he could still be in play. I think Pence could still be in play in 2024. We were well aware of the rhinos, right, and the cross aisle partnership, right, and collaboration that's going on. So Romney seems like a likely choice for that, because Biden and the Democrats could really just be used as a swing back, right, for those rhinos who may actually be the ones who are really going to reap the benefits of Trump.
You want to hear something that's interesting,
Election.
Addy? So Dr. Thomas Nicholas, now maybe George knows him or not, but he is a professor at Harvard. Okay, I did not have him as a professor because he's more, government or international affairs. But he also teaches at the Navy, War College or whatever they call it. And he used to be a Republican, and then he's now strong-headed Democrat. Well, there was a webinar that he conducted for students and alumnus at Harvard. And he was mentioning something that you just said, was that, that the Democrats think that they're in control, but they don't realize that how they got that control is actually going to hurt them, and that they're going to lose in 2024, and the Republican Party will gain control again. That this shift of power, people think it's going towards the Democratic Party. Now you got to remember, he's Democrat. So Thomas is Democrat. So he's saying that this power shift is going to go back to the Republicans because of the hubris of the Democratic Party, and that they're going to be pushing this legislation, the ultra left legislation, to the point where they'll galvanize the Republican Party, and then it will solidify in 2024. So I just thought it was interesting that what you just said was what he mentioned.
Well, if that's true, if we're both right, then they're basically just being used as a slingshot, right, or a pendulum. To
pendulum would be a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah. Just thinking ahead, a step or two ahead of the left in that sense. So it would make sense from that point of view why there are so many rhinos, right? Which I think is somewhat of a misnomer as a function of looking at politics strictly through that left-right Democratic Republican paradigm, which I think is naive to do at this point. So, but there are people like on Twitter, and I call them the cheerleaders, who think the GOP can be saved, but that's their opinion. So,
yeah. Well, and Romney's daughter running the RNC. I mean, even if Trump did get a whole bunch of contributions, I'm sure it went right into Romney's back pockets. So it's kind of like he's always fighting this. He's always, everything around him, like you always say, is stacked against him. So there's also the option of a reconstituted United States of America. We had World War I, which ended up in a whole bunch of new countries. We had World War II that ended up in a whole bunch of new countries. And because we weren't in the middle of it, we saw us as forever. But when they do bring this kind of civil war, the DHS does decide to do total war on the people of the United States, and they're going to blame, the 30% of Trump supporters, and they've got their dossiers and they're ready to do their RoboCop or Bio-Patriot Act on those deplorables. The United States could look different. It could look different. I'm not saying the states will change, but all the parties that we now know could be totally different. It could be the chippers and the non-chippers, depending on something that happens in technology, or the vaxxers and the non-vaxxers, or whatever. It might not be anything with national defense and social programs. That whole left-right old dichotomy might go away, because something huge like the BioPatriot Act could come in, and man, look at it. Everywhere you look, 5G is, pushing, and the vax, and the Bill Gates with the 1984, everything is coming. It's happening right now in front of us. We just don't realize it because we follow the shiny object. But anyway, we're freezing out here, Paul.
Oh, okay.
So I've got to get Addy back inside.
Okay. So in parting, what's the best way for the subscribers to follow your work, Addy, and to help with funding your journalism?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. If you give me a subscription, that's really all I could ask for. Just get those subs up. If you want to check out some of my work, I've been covering the Epstein saga. Recently, it's just been strictly elections at the state and federal level. But I get a lot of people who prefer to do sponsorship via PayPal, like a one-time. I think that's easy for a lot of people, just because there's not that long-term commitment. But even if you want to do a Patreon, you can cancel it at any time, and $1 or $2 is cool as well. We got our channel with neighborhood news with George, so people want to give a subscription to that channel as well. George lost his YouTube channel, as we all know, and our first channel got banned as well. And in addition to Google just taking all the money that we got. So
now I want to assure everybody that Addy can multiply. He multiplies. You should see him. So anyway, Addy can multiply, but Addy Adds is the name of the profile. So ADDYADDS is the name of the profile. And it's just one of these things, Paul, where do we go down and cover this story of this Amber Connor and the gunshots, which should be the Nashville story? Well, if that is what's required, I need to buy a ticket for $197 for Addy. So that's what it is. So I try to use my Patreon for this. I try to selectively, and that's a pretty good price for the tickets. Plus he's staying in somebody's house and they're feeding him and so forth. But that's one thing that we have to do that CNN doesn't have to do. They just say, oh, well, let's go smear somebody and take all their stuff. We'll get $1 billion there, $1 billion here. But we actually have to work for the money and come up. Transportation, I think, and lodging are our two big expense items. So
what's the best way for individuals to help support you, George?
I would just do Patreon. I like long-term support. I don't, if you're going to do a one-time thing, is ADDYS your PayPal as well?
I believe it is. I can send you the links.
Yeah, I'll send the links in the description. Yes, please send them.
Because I'm going to pay for Addy's ticket to go do this story in Atlanta, whether or not somebody sends the money. But it sure would be nice if somebody said, hey, I want to sponsor that trip, $200, and send him the $200. Like I say, he's not, when he said he's staying at the Hilton, he's staying at the Hilton Garden Inn. And that was paid for by a sponsor because she wanted that story told. And so he was there 2 weeks telling that story. And, all of the other expenses were us, so we're going to tell. Oh, sorry, Paul, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry, I got interrupted there for a second. So anyway, that's the last I'll say about that.
Okay, well, thank you for being with me on a Sunday morning, and good luck with all your journalism, you two. And I'll premiere this probably around 12 o'clock, and I'll put it in Dropbox and send you the links, and you can upload it on your channels and whatnot. But let me stop the recording here. Yeah.